And then I know that there may be some questions, just general questions at the end, specifically to understand how costs may vary from when we get into field. The idea of today was to be able to give our clients a little bit more background.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So the calculator is an online tool. It's available to everyone in the organization. We will send Brooke the username and password for it. It is a standard username and password for everybody in the organization. If you're not using a headset, if you could just mute your microphones just to avoid any feedback coming through as well on your PCs. Thank you. Okay. It's the same username and password for everyone in the organization. You go to the link, you enter the username and password, and you sign in. And it's going to give you the option to choose whether or not you're doing calls in the United States, or conversely, if you are doing them, we have it listed here as UK and Europe, but generally that will apply for, say, UK, Europe, South America as well. So United States and Canada, UK, Europe, and the rest of the world. We're going to just pick United States and Canada right now. You click on the flag. It's really a very straightforward product. So the first thing you do is you pick your approximate duration. So let's say that the call is estimated to be about 45 minutes in length. And from there you have 5 services essentially that you would apply. So the first one is front room. As soon as you pick one of these, it shows you what that encompasses from a services perspective. And then it will show you down here what the price for that ends up actually being. So if you're doing a front room only, it assumes that you've dialed out to one moderator, one respondent, and a recorder, and that the operator is monitoring the call at all times. That is $38.25 for a 45-minute interview. If you need a back room with that, the back room assumes that there's 2 clients that are going to dial in, and of course a link to the front room. And that adds the additional cost of the back room. Now, if you want to see what each one of these are individually, obviously you would just remove it. You'd say it's $27 for the back room. So front room and a back room, $65.25. And what we've done is we have, because we understand that this is an estimating tool, we want to make sure that you are not in a situation where you are underestimating what the cost is. So we have been generous with this to try and actually sort of overestimate what the cost would be by a factor of about sort of 10 to 15%. Again, just to make sure that you aren't stuck at the end of the day with underquoting your client. Additional services that are available beyond that. There was a narrator. This has to do more with UK. I don't think we've ever actually had to use it in the US, but it has to do with GDPR compliance. And there was a circumstance in a few interviews where what would actually happen is that an individual would actually be listening to the conversation, even though it were in English. Even though it wasn't English, they would be listening to the conversation, and they would just simply be repeating everything that the moderator and the respondent were saying into a back room, so that there was no way that those individuals could be identified in the recording or in any of the information that went back to the client. Translator, again, this sort of goes more toward the UK services or the global services. When an original interview is not in English and the client requests an English translation, this will have a live translation into the back room. And what this does is this assumes that there would be a translator with two lines, one to listen, one to speak on. There is still a back room required because the translator would be from the front room into the back room. Then there would be the recording of both the original language and the English translation as well, included in that. And finally, voice masking, which is another thing that has been utilized more out of the UK office and into a lot of the EU meetings. And what that does is create a real-time digital mask of the respondent or the moderator, or the moderator, into the back room for GDPR compliance, so that in a circumstance where the client, again, is either listening live or is listening to a recording, the respondent's voice is actually digitally altered so that they, again, could not be easily recognized if someone were to listen to the recording. So every time you add one of these, it will give you, it'll bump up the estimated cost of each interview that you would be having. Again, most of these are more applicable to the EU at this point, although there are some circumstances, of course, where where we have seen some cross-pollination between the two organizations, and that you are utilizing some of these additional features. But basically, if you go in and you put these numbers together, that is going to give you what the maximum for the interview should be. You should be able to put your markup on that, go back to the client and say, this is what we estimate each interview to be, and you should be in good shape. Now, Brooke asked about variables. When or what variables can actually affect the cost. Really, the only thing from a variable perspective that's going to affect anything is time. If the call is scheduled to start at 9 a.m. Eastern time, and for whatever reason, so what we would do is we would first get the moderator online. If there's a translator, we would get the translator online. And finally, what we would do is connect the respondent. That is the last group that we would actually end up connecting. In that circumstance, sometimes the client would call in too. So we'd start calling out. We would get the moderator online at 5 or 10 minutes before the hour, depending on how comfortable we are within the process. If it's the first time we've spoken to that moderator, then we might get them a little bit earlier. If this is the 10th interview in a series, then we'll get them online, 3 or 4 minutes before the hour. We'll get, if there's a translator online, we'll get the translator online at the same time with both their lines and make sure that they can hear and we can hear them, again, a few minutes before the hour. And then finally, just going to just about the hour when they anticipate actually being called, we would call out to the respondent, put the respondent into the call, make sure that everything goes through and that they are happy, that they've complied with all of the or any rules or anything that might be put out there by you or by the moderators, and then start the recorders at that time, and then that's how things would proceed. Where I was going with this is where a call might be longer. If we can't get a hold of the moderator, for whatever reason, a lot of the time they are doctors and they are in appointments or they are in surgery or something like that. If we can't get a hold of the moderator until a quarter after the hour and it's a 45-minute call, then suddenly the call is going to be 15 minutes longer than you anticipated. If we've got everything set up and we can't get hold of the moderator or can't get hold of the respondent, I'm sorry, I believe I meant to say respondent earlier. We can't get hold of the respondent at all. Again, for some reason, perhaps they have to reschedule. Then that component that where our lines and our operators were engaged prior to that, 10 or 15 minutes ahead of time, there will be a cost for that, and then there will be a cost for the makeup call, the real-time component of the makeup call after the fact. So whatever was incurred, if it was 15 minutes, ahead of time before we realized we couldn't get the respondent online, there'd be a 15-minute charge of these charges. There'd be a third of that $96 that would be incurred, and then there would be the cost for the other call, the makeup call, the reschedule call that would take place in the future. So those are really sort of the only two variables that would take place that would increase the cost associated with any given interview.
So if we have more than two clients in the back room, does that impact cost?
It will, yes. We do anticipate it's not a huge charge, so if it's actually a portion of what you're dealing with here. So, I mean, even if we put back room here again, you would see that this would give you 4 clients. It also gives you another link to the front room, which of course is redundant. You wouldn't be using that, so it would just be 4 clients in the back room, and it would increase the cost of the interview accordingly. Again, there's padding in there because you have that link line, so that assuming if there's 4 clients that are going to be dialing in, you've got some padding there for your client as well.
Okay, so if we were estimating more than 2 clients, we would just add another back room to the calculator.
Right.
Great. And then can you talk a little bit about the downloading of the recording? If the client accesses more than once, that will also...
Yeah, that would trigger a charge to the client. The recording itself, because you are able to download it, you don't need to listen to it online. There is a single charge for downloading the recording. At that point, they can forward the recording to anyone they want. They don't have to go back and download the recording again. They don't have to listen to it online again if they want to do that. It really is just a very convenient method of accessing it once, downloading it, and then forwarding it off to anyone else that needs to actually be able to listen to it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And again, that as indicated here would incorporate the one download as well. So that would be incorporated in a front room or whatever.
Got it. Great. Any other questions from the team? As you can see, so in our example that Joe's got up, this is basically 4 clients listening in, a translator, and then respondent moderator. This is pretty common amongst our EU markets. Now, this is estimating for US, but you can see the charge per call is about $100 US. So I think that we've been, not necessarily costing it appropriately, but you can see that because this is operated assisted and there's a lot of things that go involved, it is expensive per call. So it's super important that we're using the calculator to know how much it's going to charge through Mercuri. What other questions does the team have? I know some of you guys have coded with Mercuri, others have not. This may be brand new.
If you have any questions, your mic may be muted. You can just unmute your mic and ask the question. It's an open forum.
So I have a question. Is the U.S. and EU option, is that for what we want to see in terms of currency, USD versus?
It's all U.S. It's all U.S. dollars. Everything is in U.S. dollars. The only difference ends up being that long distance out of North America into EU or South America or anywhere really outside of North America is accounted for in this quotation. whereas North American long distance, if we're calling out, is included in the base price of a front room interview. We are dealing with variables in the EU. For instance, mobile phones can sometimes, calls to mobile phones can often be more expensive than calls to landlines. And so we've incorporated the potential for that variance into the UK or EU estimator, again, to make sure that people are estimating correctly.
So if I have EU interviews, if most of the client team is local, then I would select EU?
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yes. And the idea here, again, is to make sure that you aren't, you're not underestimating to your client what the cost is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, as I said up front, this is generous in terms of estimating what the price would be, with the intention of making sure that you're not stuck with a loss at the end of the end of the project. Most of the calls will not. Again, time, all things being equal, and if the time works that the way that you've estimated and such, won't actually reach these costs. But we want to make sure that you're not coming back to us saying, "Oh, we're running at a loss now because we didn't know what your cost was going to be to us."
I think probably 99.9% of the time we're going to be using the EU version, so the British flag, to estimate for the cost.
Okay, and that is, that's pretty obvious on the drop down here. It does say U.S. or Canada, or when you switch back, it says, here's the option UK, Europe. So, and when you just look down here, it says it's been designed to provide you with a guideline for pricing. Please call me back at 915-631-3261. Thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions? Thank you, Kit. Those were good questions. Okay, great. Joe, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, anytime. If there are any other questions, anything like that, anytime you have any questions, concerns, anything like that, feel free to email us at cs@mercuri.ca. We're happy to answer any questions that you have. If somebody ever wants to go through this estimator again on their own, we're happy to, don't be shy, I guess is the operative phrase. We want to work as a team with you to be able to make sure that we're providing the best service to you and your clients, as obviously you want to do. So we want to make sure that you have as much information about what we can do for you and how everything works as we can possibly give you. As I indicated, we will make sure that Brooke gets this, the link and the login credentials again that she can forward to all of you and anyone else in the team. We'll send a link to the recording as well so that you can take a look at that. And again, if anybody needs to refresh their memories, but we're always here for you when you need us.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe. I hope you have a good weekend.
Okay. Thanks very much. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.